It's not only having a contract, it's reading it thoroughly.
Our cities do not have place for the elderly, they don't have place for children, and they don't have place for physically challenged. Our pedestrian experience is zero. It's not even zero, it is negative.
Your public buildings really define a city, and unfortunately a lot of the public buildings are again a huge opportunity lost.
Welcome to another episode of Beyond Blueprints. It's great to have you on the show. Today on the show we have architect Sohrab Dalal and architect Sonali Bhagwati. Both today run DPA. Originally they started off as a couple running Spazzio, which merged with DesignPlus to now form DPA or DesignPlus Architecture. They're extremely passionate about architecture, the role of architecture in urban planning, especially the city of Delhi. Both of them have worked with international partners on collaborative projects across India and are one of the top architectural firms in the country today. They have won numerous awards for their work and are a couple who've been married to each other and working in the same space for 35 years. This conversation has been extremely enlightening for me, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy it as well. If you like this content, don't forget to press the like, subscribe and share button. Now, coming back to the type of projects that you all have, you have vast variety of work that you have done, whether it's corporates, commercial, residential, interiors, sports, and everything else. What's for each of you individually? What's your favorite project type that you truly enjoy doing?
Personally, I have enjoyed doing what you call the built to suit projects because they are technically always smaller projects. They are not normally the larger ones.
Sure.
They're more controlled, they're smaller, and you conceive it as a building and into the interior very seamlessly. So for me, that is like the nicest experience, where even if it's a home, like one of the homes we did recently, right from its architecture and all the way into the interior, it was just a seamless working experience. Mm-hmm. And it just moved in and up to the last artwork in place. Right. So I think as a designer, as an architect, that is something which gives you a great deal of satisfaction.
For you?
For me, it would definitely be hospitality. I enjoy in hotels. I don't do interior work, so it's not that I take the project from the inception right through to the finish, because the interior would either be done sometimes by an external firm, sometimes very often with by Sonali's vertical. But I think what I really enjoy about hospitality is that while it's the same building type, each project is so different, and the geography, the requirements of the client, the clientele that this particular project will be servicing, all this really influences what that product is going to be. And as I said, so even if it's a hotel, even though it's one project typology, since every project is so different, that's what I really like about it.
Any particular project or a particular hospitality hotel that's dear to your heart, which you may or may not have been involved in?
Well, no, I think definitely the ones that I've been involved in. Right. I think one project that is very dear to my heart was the first Taj Vivanta that we did in Bangalore. We did it in conjunction with a very dear friend of mine, Wong Chuman from Singapore.
Okay.
He runs a company called Wow. But it was a true collaboration. And, it was not that he had a particular scope and we had a particular scope, So whether it was at the concept stage, we were equally involved in the project, and even at maybe the construction stage, they were also involved with certain key decisions. So I think it was a great working relationship to begin with. The second thing is that it was the first Taj Vivanta that was built in the country. So Ratan Tata himself was involved with the project because it was something that was dear to his heart, since it was a new brand that they were really putting into the market. And there were several constraints with the project, some planning constraints and things which really which made the design pretty unique. Like, we couldn't go above 24 meters in height. That was a restriction that came from from ITPL, which was the park within which this project was built. So we had to do a very horizontal solution, which is very atypical for a hospitality project. So we had 70 keys per floor, which is a very large number actually for a 250 room hotel. So I think some of the challenges that came with the project, I think the ultimate design solution that emerged, the project has been greatly appreciated. It's won several awards also. And so I think, overall, that was definitely, I'd say, probably one of the more enjoyable projects that I worked on in the hospitality.
Just to stay with this, 70 rooms per floor, you need to solve for housekeeping, you need to solve for how far the guest has to walk to the elevator.
So you need to have several cores. You can't have one guest core because nobody will stay there if you make them walk more than
if you from the elevator you need to walk for 10 minutes, then
nobody's wanting
no one wants to.
It's not a shopping mall where each shop is an experience, So it's it had several challenges, but the great thing is that it was in Bangalore. Beautiful climate. We could introduce lots of courtyards and semi-open spaces because they work in that climate, and so you have this sort of outdoor-indoor experience.
Right.
And but yes, being a very horizontal solution, so we call it a ground scraper instead of calling it a skyscraper.
That's very interesting. So Sonali, coming back to you, you mentioned that you need to be an MBA to build a really good practice, and that business acumen side is required, and architects aren't built to be that way. But you've had experience with corporate companies. You've been an independent director at Green Lamp Industries, and you've seen how companies operate. How's your experience as an ID over there, and what did you learn from that?
That was I have to first of all admit that I don't understand numbers, and I have no idea about the profit numbers and the expense numbers and all the charts that they present. But I think sitting through the meetings, what one really understood is the processes that company was following, and I felt that Green Lamp was really run in a very tight and a very precise manner, which is what very structured, very precise. And I felt that everything, even during the meeting, everything was put in a very structured manner. All the information would be correctly there, and there was very little questions that it warranted, in that sense. They were also always constantly looking at adding to their portfolio different product offerings. So it was very interesting. Even their factories were very clean, very organized, the way each thing would go through their inventories and their product storage, everything. So I just felt that it was a huge learning experience on those aspects.
Right.
It may not directly impact us because we are a service industry, but the fact that there are certain quality and processes being followed and how it makes you efficient, that was a learning process.
Yeah, I think I've worked with a couple of firms internationally. Also, we do partner with several large international firms also on some projects. And I find that the larger firms, and the successful ones, all have a corporate structure, So there will be different departments. There will be, there'll be a legal department, which is something that we would never be able to afford or ever think about. They, of course, have a separate finance, and there is a system in place like any other professional consultancy practice, any large professional consultancy practice. So I think for firms to once firms cross a particular size, and not only in terms of the manpower, but also in terms of the size of projects that they're handling, I think they need to definitely corporatize to a certain extent. Also, what happens is that you're suddenly dealing with large multinational corporations. We are doing a couple of projects today where you're dealing with a multinational corporation, huge corporation. So they already have a structure in place. They would have a legal department. They would have different departments. So if you need to be able to respond to any questions that might come to you, you need to have a similar structure in your own firm. So, and I've seen that some of these successful large practices overseas have this corporate structure, and I think they can only grow to that size if they have a structure like that in place.
Because even when there is a communication, you need to be able to respond to it correctly.
Yeah.
And use the correct language, correct, clauses, and all that requires knowledge which is beyond architecture.
Yeah.
So that's what Sohrab is saying, that, that corporatizing is something which I don't think any of the Indian firms are really into it. But for a large, when you're doing large projects, international projects, it's something which is, I think,
no, I think some of the larger Indian firms are also
maybe
they have some sort of structure in place, but I've seen it far more correctly done in some of the international firms.
And unless you're doing small mom and pop type of projects, then it's a different matter.
Right.
But when you are starting to work with international or multinational organizations, then you
or
have
even
to,
the large Indian. I mean,
or even large Indian
you're
organizations.
working with a DLF with any of the.
I mean, many years ago we did a project for a multinational over here, but this was, I think, maybe 25 years ago or 24 years ago. And we had X fees. And suddenly at the end of it, they wrote a letter saying, due to this, they decided to cut 5 lakhs of our fees.
Right.
Okay. So my sister's a lawyer and a very prominent one. So I knocked at her door for help. And I said, now what do I do? She says that you have to go on your contract. So she read my contract. She said, your contract very clearly defines that whatever they're writing is not valid,
Right.
Not tenable.
It's not tenable. So she drafted out a letter, which was, of course, very harsh according to me. So I had to soften it a little bit. But it was written out correctly, and everything was taking its support from the contract document, which as an architect, I would have never thought of doing, And at the end of it all, I got that money. That money was paid to me. So I think that's what matters,
But you had a contract in place in the first place.
Yeah, we had a contract.
Because a lot of, and because of podcast and off-camera, people have expressed to me that this is one of the biggest issues, that they've learned it the hard way. That they don't
it's not only having a contract, it's reading it thoroughly.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we have contracts on all our projects, and I learned to my very horror recently on a couple of projects that we hadn't read the contract, and the contract was very one-sided. And but once you've signed it, So you got to honor
it's your responsibility.
It's your responsibility. So I think as you go through projects and as you go through different clients and bigger projects, you learn things.
Sometimes clients send you contracts which run into like 100 pages.
Yeah.
Now, where are you going to sit and read 100 pages?
You do know that those contracts are purposely made to be 100 pages,
Yeah,
right? To
because-
wear you out.
And then somewhere in the middle,
They will
there'll be
slip in some
there'll be some
things.
fine print, which is very good. So, but that's
And as an architect, I said I'll go to sleep even on the second page,
Right.
because we are just not made to.
And the terminology and the language
language.
is all.
A legal language, you start reading a paragraph. At the end of the paragraph, you don't know where you started, because
because a paragraph can be a whole page also.
Yeah.
I mean, you just do not know.
So so that's why you need a lawyer then,
Yeah.
But again, it's all got to do with. I think it boils down, and we talk about these firms overseas. The big difference is the fee. the fee that these
Has to come
firms
to
get,
that. Yeah.
allow them to have this structure.
Yeah.
The fees that the client here expects the same service, but is not willing to pay the fee. I mean, I can give you an example, and I'm not going to take any names.
Sure.
But there are clients of ours who would pay for a service which is akin to what we're doing. So when we do a project, there'll be a structural consultant and there'll be an MEP consultant, a services consultant. And there have been projects that we have been involved with where typically the consultants over here in India would be paid maybe 10 rupees a square foot, 7 rupees a square foot. Okay. The same service, the same client has engaged consultants overseas for 70 rupees and 60 rupees. You know, it's the same, they're getting the same deliverable at the end of the day. But just because one is an international firm.
And it's not that there is any difference in, because MEP and structure is hardcore. I mean, there is no
design.
There's no design. It is just design of the service.
So unfortunately, I think the fee structure is another very sore point in this country.
I think it's improving, right?
It's definitely improving. But again, now, for example, with a lot of the government work, which is where some of the large projects are today. I'm not saying all.
With L1.
Not all of them, but most projects are decided on L1.
Sohrab, it is not most. It is 99%
are decided on L1. Now, some of the fees some of the projects that have been awarded, in the last 3-5 years, are at fees that you cannot imagine could be workable at all. So
I mean, if you want to work honestly, it is not possible.
Yeah, so
you cannot even pay your salaries.
Right.
Yeah. So the thing is that it's so forget setting up a corporate structure. It's not even a fee which is you are able to sustain the present structure with. So I think fees is a challenge even today, and I think it has improved for sure. The problem is that it had improved and then COVID came.
Right.
And then because of COVID, people had to drop their fees,
Yeah, because of the fight for survival.
Fight for survival. And there was a dearth of work in the market. Yeah. And then the client said that, if you could do the work at that fee at that time, why do you need to hike it up again?
Right.
So fortunately, what we have found with the work that we are doing, the work, the RFPs really now go to a handful of people, So, as long as we decide that, yes, we should charge a certain minimum, we can do that with certain projects. We can't do it with all projects. Right. So, it's still, I would say, way below the level it should be.
What Sohrab was saying, some of the nicest and the biggest projects are all in the public sector, all with the government. And the way the government structure works is that they will only give it to those 4 or 5 PSUs, and then they will work out further.
Yeah.
So the chance for an architect to really come in and do something worthwhile starts getting minimized.
Right.
And these are projects which I would call nation building projects. Yeah. And for that, you have the worst possible situations. So it's not only a low fee, how to get your fee out from the government from the PSU is another story.
Another story, yeah.
So there are so many impediments that an architect is not able to perform. Or you'll get an architect who doesn't care about performance and just churns it all out, Yeah. So the projects internationally in any other city where you see the best of projects happening are the same projects over here where you have this situation.
So, someone earlier, one of the previous guests on the show, if I'm not wrong, I think it was architect Hiren Patel from Ahmedabad. He mentioned that in India, I think it was him, I'm not sure exactly, but I remember the content was that instead of asking for a bid, the government's approach should be to identify that what is the need and who is the best firm or who are the best few firms that can serve that particular need, and to approach the architect that, okay, this is the problem, this is what we want to build out,
No, I'll tell you.
and to go down
Yeah,
that
we
path.
have actually this happens sometimes with invited competitions,
Right.
and there are cases of those. I think that's a much better way to do it.
Yeah.
So two things should happen. Even when we get invited for a competition, we said there must two things are very necessary. One is that everybody should be given the same fee. So you say that this is there are 5 people. This is the fee that the client is going to pay for the project. So you only do the competition if you feel
On the
fee,
design.
or you only do the design if you feel the fee is correct for that.
Correct.
And if everybody feels it's correct, then it's a level playing field. And then so the fee has been decided up front. And the 5 people or 4 people or 6 people chosen also have the requisite experience,
Absolutely.
to do that project. So I think that is really the correct way to do it if you want to hold a competition.
So I'll tell you, one is of course to decide the fees and the experience of the firm, and also to I feel that to add to that, like out of the 6, let's say 1 would get the project. The other 5 have to be compensated for in a small way for the work done, because then you have serious people coming in.
But in limited competitions, that does happen.
That's what I'm saying. In limited competitions, like a private sector normally does that, But I feel that this needs to extend to the public sector also. Yeah. And then you get serious players who put in the right effort. Even the jury, you cannot have bureaucrats sitting on the jury alone. You need to have prominent.
I agree with you.
So those are the kind of. So
but
the
there's a flip
seriousness has to
side.
come.
There's a flip side to this as well. If this is how all competitions were done, today you wouldn't get a Sydney Opera House, okay? Because that was a sketch done by this Danish architect, and he had a great idea. It seemed very impractical. Those shells were structurally very, very difficult to do. So, it needs somebody, I don't know what the right word is. I'm not eccentric is not the right word, but somebody who has, a different way of thinking, and then.
But it is a sensitive person at the jury level.
So those sparks would never happen if every project was decided through the process we were talking about, because then, you would get the large firms who have a particular ideology, they have a particular design language that they believe in. And, a lot of the architecture that they produce is like that. But to get some of these, I would say, path-breaking projects, like some of the work that Zaha Hadid did. But of course, Zaha Hadid's firm then also did get corporatized because it's become, they have so many architects, but they have a similar sort of train of thought. But they've managed to find a good balance between it.
What is the DUAC?
Delhi Urban Arts Commission.
And what was your role in that?
So I was a member of the Delhi Urban Arts Commission for 2 consecutive terms. And the Urban Arts Commission was formed with an idea of sort of looking at the aesthetics of buildings coming up in Delhi. Not the smaller ones, but the larger ones. So either if they're on a road which is more than a certain size, or the building built up area is more than a certain volume, then it needs to come to DUAC for approval, for aesthetics. Of course, all sorts of things come to DUAC, and one of the questions that always arose was, who is to say my aesthetics is better than the person who's presenting, So you have to be able to respect the other person, but suggest, if you feel required, suggest some things which can only enhance.
Right.
So, very rarely do we have projects where we had to completely discard it because it was completely off track.
So I think one of the changes, as an outsider, I was not part of the DUAC, but I was an architect presenting to the DUAC. So I think one of the changes that I noticed when Raj Rewal was the chairman and Sonali was a part of the team was that I think the comments that began to come out on a project were less to do with the aesthetics, because she said, just because her aesthetics are different from mine, that doesn't mean that her thoughts are correct and
yeah,
I'm
someone
wrong.
else is wrong.
So I think they began to comment more on some of the things that would affect not only the project but affect the surroundings. So some of the urban issues. If something that the design was doing affected the surroundings in a negative way, then they brought those points out rather than talk of specifically the design of the project, And I think that really probably is what the mandate for the DUAC really was when it started out.
Yeah.
I think again it's got to do with egos. I think some of the people that ran some of the
previous commissions,
maybe then your ego takes over and you think that you have a right or you've been given a right to really dictate something to the person on the other side of the table. And but I think fortunately during these 2 terms I definitely saw a change where they really talked less about, unless you did something that was really
off track
or affecting the aesthetics of that environment. It was more to do with some of the more I would say planning and issues at either at a street level or even at maybe a colony level, township level.
So you were talking about urban planning, right? And of course with your role, how do you and you don't have you haven't worked much in that space, but I would love to know your opinion on how cities in India are growing. Where do you see what are the red flags in your mind and what are the good things that's happening?
So I'll talk about this first. As a part of DUAC, when Raj Rewal was heading the commission, we all felt together that DUAC, as Sohrab said, is not about aesthetics. It's all about its impact on the community, on the street, at a city level, at a district level. And so we decided that to form a small hub in which we, the government, of course, it was funded by government.
Sure.
And in which we hired urban designers and landscape architects. And we actually then collaborated with DDA, with the police department, various agencies for points for areas which were problematic areas or which were live projects,
Right.
And we would take them on and actually create concept level solutions. In absence of any valid projects, we would take on what we felt on a suo motu basis.
Okay.
Like, for example, one of the very interesting first projects that we looked at was the walkability in Delhi. Because personally, I felt that, as a child, I was cycling to school. I used to walk to my friend's place. I would walk to Khan Market every evening because I used to live in central Delhi. But today, I can't really walk. I mean, there is no space and it's a risky business, It's only people who have no option are on cycles or walking. Otherwise, you get into a 2-wheeler or a 3-wheeler or a 4-wheeler. So we said that let's take on projects on a suo motu basis. So this walkability we started addressing. I said, okay, I am familiar with this area where I've lived for 15, 20 years now, which is the South Delhi region.
Right.
And what happens to pedestrians? So we felt that the Delhi, despite its haphazard traffic and everything, still is one of those cities with a huge amount of greens.
Yes.
It has one of the maximum greens in the country.
Right.
So we said that, and what are these greens doing? They are completely they may be in the middle of an urban area, but it is completely disconnected with the urban fabric around. So much so that sometimes people in the vicinity also don't know that there is this huge forest over here, because you just pass by in your car without giving it a second thought. So we said, why not try and integrate this with the urban fabric and try and create alternate pedestrian routes which go through these beautiful green areas, So we looked at connecting what I call fort to fort, like let's say from Tughlakabad Fort to Siri Fort.
Right.
And there is this huge green, which with a few connecting nodes which go over a road or under a road or whatever,
Right.
we could actually create a pedestrian link all the way from Tughlakabad Fort to Siri Fort, And can you imagine giving a pedestrian 7-8 kilometers of beautiful green areas to walk?
Right.
And it's not only for a morning walk, because all these parks are great for morning walks. But what happens to it in the daytime? They're completely left to themselves. So why not use them? That was the whole idea. So we did this project, which was, of course, a very concept level project, but I think it's a very workable thing. And I think we need to address the walkability in our city. And that's a very sort of a pressing point, because today our cities do not have place for the elderly.
No, they don't.
They don't have place for children, and they don't have place for physically challenged.
Right.
So these three categories are completely obliterated. And unless you are young and agile and able to navigate the ups and downs of our urban environment, you cannot survive. And that is, the experience of any city is judged on its pedestrian experience, the quality of any city. So in our pedestrian experience is zero. It's not even zero, it is negative. And that's what we should be addressing.
And that's what's led to the rise of these gated communities, right?
Yes, that's exactly.
Elders want to shift in there because
Yes.
they don't want to deal with
into
cities.
communities like this one
Yeah.
over here.
Yeah,
It makes a big difference.
exactly.
I have a question for both of you, especially when it comes to dealing with clients. And you've both spoken very passionate about things that are dear to you. What happens on projects where clients don't align with your point of view? Have you?
No, so, I think what happens is that, at the beginning of a project, you can go through several rounds of
Discovery.
of the concept also,
Right.
And I think I would say in 90% of the cases, we have found a solution that is, acceptable to the client also. Sometimes it takes longer, sometimes it doesn't take so much time. But I'd say in most cases, we have been able to come to some sort of an agreement on the cost. There have been a few stray cases where, maybe after several attempts, we both realize that maybe we're not the right partners, because any project is a partnership. I think the client plays an equally important role as the architect or the rest of the design team. So if for some reason even after several attempts, I think it's best for the project that you really part ways, and it has happened, but fortunately not too often.
I also feel that, of course, those stray cases are an exception. But in a lot of the cases, it is important to understand where the client is coming from.
Yeah.
What is their aspiration? Especially in the smaller projects that I do, it's a very close relationship with the client. And you need to understand their aspirations, what is it that they are looking for. Sometimes a design language may not be exactly what you may have in mind, but if you understand them, then you are able to modulate the language to work for them and still be, I would say, balanced in its own way. Like I would talk of, let's say, a classical language. It's not a language I would probably look at personally. Right. But if a client is looking at that direction, then there are ways and means of putting it together correctly in a manner which will be nice, it will be visually good, it is balanced, it is harmonious, and it works as something that you would want to do as an architect. So I think there is a lot of work that we need to do to understand the client and translate it in a manner which is mutually working
That's
Like,
as
you
a
know,
design
That's
as
very
well
well
as
said.
a
yeah, one of
That's
the
very well
most
Huh.
satisfying projects that I've worked on in the past 4 or 5 years is this Thapar University in Patiala.
Right.
And it was an existing university, and they had it's a large campus. They have about 200 acres there, and they had 5,000 students. And about 7 or 8 years ago, they got a very dynamic new sort of chairman of the board of governors, and his vision was to really make Thapar University the number one university in the country, maybe after the IITs, at least as the tech universities. And so he looked at, and he understood that a very important aspect of this was to improve the built environment of the university, and that it's not only the academic quotient, but even the hostels, the academic buildings themselves really need to be world class to attract the right students, to attract the right faculty, and so that it becomes really then the results would show in what their students can produce. And I think the main reason we were able to achieve what we have over there is that was because of the relationship with the client.
Yeah.
It was a fabulous relationship. It was a relationship of mutual respect and trust. They allowed us to do a lot of things that many other clients may not have allowed us to do. So I give, the full marks to the client for that. And today the results are there to be seen. This project has received numerous awards. Last couple of months ago, it was awarded the RIBA Gold Medal, which is the Royal Institute of British Architects medal. They sort of honor about 15 or 20 projects every year and worldwide, and this was one of them. And it only happened because of I would say the
Vision,
the clients,
yeah.
and the vision of the client themselves, and they wanted to create a world-class facility. We also were very happy to do that, and it's been a great experience.
But do you miss having shifted from
Not
South
at
Delhi
all.
to this area?
I'm actually quite grateful because when I go back to South Delhi, actually, if somebody had asked me even 6 months before we moved to Gurgaon, that would you move to Gurgaon? I would have said never, ever, ever. And I've learned to say never never.
It's so.
I think more than
I will
Delhi,
take this offline with you.
more than Delhi or Gurgaon, I think it's
Gated living.
Community living. I mean, I think this is what we both really appreciated a lot. And if the same quality of gated living was available in Delhi, maybe we wouldn't have moved to Gurgaon. So it's not something about Gurgaon. I think it's the quality
of the
living of the development.
Yeah.
All right, wonderful.
Actually, Gurgaon is the result of bad land laws of Delhi.
Yeah, because
Okay, let's
100%,
understand this.
yes,
This is very
yes.
interesting.
No, I'll tell you what. For example, in the 80s or 90s.
No, I think even 70s.
No, I'm saying when we were doing offices.
Right.
If somebody wanted to build a 20,000 square foot office, they would have to do this across 4 buildings in a community center on 4 floors.
In Nehru Place or any of these
with
places.
floor plates of 2,000, 3,000 square feet each, So you could never get the quality of office that you can get today. And
even the access to those areas. Can you imagine Nehru Place? I used to always say that even if somebody paid me money, I don't want to be there.
The staircase, they're dingy
Horrible.
and they're horrible.
I think, credit due to where credit is due. I would say DLF recognized this problem and developed Cyber City.
Yeah.
So that you could get an office with a 10,000. In those days, a 5,000 square foot first plate was considered large. Then it went to 10,000, 15,000. Today, a lot of office buildings have 50 and 60,000 square foot plates, which is what allowed the global companies to really come into India. And that is what really fueled the whole back office boom, because space, the physical space was now available to create those offices. Delhi never had those. I mean, none of the commercial areas in Delhi, even when they built some of the newer places like Bikaji Place, Kama Place, and Nehru
Their
Place,
whole,
They just did the same thing.
the same
no,
nonsense.
because their whole basis was wrong. They always created these small boxes, and then you'd have like somebody took 3 of them, somebody took 5 of them. So you had to amalgamate some 5 landlords before you could even get a decent size.
And each space would have its own toilet, so that would again eat into the space. Today all public buildings or good office buildings have common toilets.
Yeah.
You don't really have each little module doesn't have its own.
I guess built for businesses that happened in the 70s and 80s, right? There was there were very few large scale, and
also,
the large scale business that existed, would just buy their own land and build their
but
own
in Delhi,
office.
you couldn't do that.
Yeah. So I think
There was nothing available, and private development was banned in Delhi.
So I think
Your
that's what
land
fueled this
holdings
growth.
was limited. You could not have land which was big enough to do that. So there were a lot of these bad land laws. And Gurgaon actually happened because of that.
Yeah, they were able to solve that problem.
Yeah. Shali, wonderful. I think let's wrap up. I think thank you so much. It's been such a wonderful pleasure speaking to both of you. And I think we could have just gone on and on and on for hours, because the amount of experience and content that both of you have and the passion that you have for this space is just absolutely amazing. And thank you so much for coming on to my show.
Thank you. Our
Pleasure's all ours.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed the conversation.
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah. All right. Thank you.